Shannon, how are you?
I am well, Jared. How are you?
Doing well. Friday is here. The weekend has kind of arrived, and I forgot it was Labor Day weekend, and I was at the gym and it was vacant, and I was trying to figure out why, because normally Friday people are still in there, but everyone is taking that last summer trip this weekend. It looks like, and they all left early. So I'm glad that you're here and other people are here because it is Labor Day weekend.
This is Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining doesn't have Liberty Weekend.
I think you're right. I think Bitcoin mining seems to be a 25-hour a day situation. So that's where we are. Everyone joining, how are you? I hope you're well. We originally were going to wait till around 11:03, around 11:03. We're going to give people a couple minutes to kind of hop in. But I do think we are going to start a little bit earlier. Shannon is Compass Mining's chief mining officer, and he has asked that we start a little bit earlier.
We can wait.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I meant like start the stream earlier so I can make sure my microphone and stuff was working.
Well, you sound great. Hopefully, I sound okay. I'm on Gen 1 AirPods, which is, I know, that's like using a CPU. So
I truthfully didn't know how amazing AirPods were. I was using like Bose with my iPhone.
yeah.
And then one of my buddies who travels a whole lot, he's like, dude, you got to use these. And sure enough, like I put his in, the sound canceling on an airport while doing like in an airplane, all that is just, it is great.
Which version do you have? Because I ask because I know that Apple's about to drop new AirPods in the iPhone 16, and that's right around the corner as they normally do in the fall. So I'm not sure which ones you have. Do you have the Pros, the ones
Yeah,
with the silicon?
whatever the newest Pros are. Yeah, they got a little silicon in that type of thing, but they're as far as like noise canceling and all that stuff, flying on planes, listening to stuff while you're doing that, and it's actually really good.
Sweet. Yeah, I had the Gen 2s, but then they started getting a little funky on me, and now I have some Gen 1s, which is, I don't know. It's like I said, it's like using CPUs. People kind of look at you like, that's cool. Anyways, as people are joining, welcome. We're going to wait about another minute, and then we will get kicked off. We just want to give people a little bit of time. I know most people on this call are running around, even though it is Friday and Labor Day weekend, as Shannon has reminded me, there is no days off in Bitcoin mining. The blocks continue to move forward. I know that also if you are not able to connect to X for whatever reason, Curtis Harris is currently going live through our LinkedIn. So if that is an option, if that's easier for you to check in on desktop or whatever it may be, you can go see Curtis over on LinkedIn. Tim is here. I see Tim. I assume that is Compass Tim, I guess I would say. Tim, if that is you, if you could go ahead and request to speak, that would be great, and I will get you up on stage. So when you're called upon, you can answer. It is now 11:03. I said that is the time when we would kind of kick off this event. So why don't we go ahead and get started? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jared. I run the media here at Compass, and this August facility roundup is an event that we're going to do monthly. At the end of every month, we're going to do 1 hour live on X. And I said a little bit earlier, if you heard me, Curtis is also live on LinkedIn, where we're basically going to do a roundup of our facilities, talk about what's going on in our facilities, talk about what's going on in our operations, give clients and customers and partners a chance to hopefully come up on stage and ask questions once we're kind of done with our roundup. If you would like to come on stage once we get to the Q&A, simply request to talk and I will let you do that. And then I just ask that we are very cognizant of when someone's speaking, we let them speak. And we're respectful because no one likes a space when people are talking over one another. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm going to kick the mic to Shannon, who was on right on time. Thank you, Shannon. He's the Chief Mining Officer at Compass, and he will start to go through some of the facilities. And I would ask that we keep questions till the end, just so we make sure that we're able to give each facility kind of its day in the sun, if that makes sense. So let's get going. Good to see other people on the call. Thank you for continuing to come in and join. And I'm going to go ahead and mute. And Shannon, you're up.
I feel like that's a lot of pressure now. I actually have to get these numbers right versus just have fun and answer questions. Yeah, so basically from a facility roundup standpoint, so we're looking at like an overview of August, which is pretty exciting. So we're sitting here at the end of summer months, we're at the end of 4CP in Texas, and we're at the end of the months where all the miners have been doing heavy curtailment. So generally speaking, from here on out, the curtailments should be much more minor across all facilities that participate in demand response and various load shedding programs to help grids not be overwhelmed by that process. But I'll just kind of work top to bottom here and go through some facilities. I don't know if the people down below have miners there or they're just here to listen, but give you an idea of what the performance looked like in August and what's going on at each individual facility. So start off with Indiana 1 and Indiana 2. This facility, we actually reduced about 400 units in, or probably a little bit more than that earlier this year. And then after that reduction, there was improvements made to the air handling of the facility to try to prevent some more overheating this summer. Then we redeployed and expanded that facility with, I think it was over 1,300, 1,400 more units back into that facility. So looking at August, that facility ran at about 99.4% uptime, which is pretty good. Like our contracts we give are always based around 95% uptime. And most of that comes from, summertime month curtailments is where that uptime is usually most impactful to people. Utilization is another number we track. So that's like in the sites, if we have thousands of miners sitting in one of these facilities, what percentage of those miners are online? So currently in Indiana 1, Indiana 2, we're looking at about 94% of those miners are online. The biggest things that we look at when we're having miners offline is one, are these new miners, were they DOA batches that have to go back to Bitmain for warranty repair? Or are these miners that are aging out? They've been there for 2-3 years. Maybe it's an S19 Pro or an original S19 that's really struggling right now from a profitability standpoint anyways, but is also dealing with repairs that need to happen, whether it's power supplies, control boards, fans, getting approval from the clients to be able to get that done. So generally, when we see low utilization, it's dealing with the aging fleet or some sort of repairs. We talk about a few other sites. We'll talk about how infrastructure affects that as well. So did you want to do questions after each site, or do you just want me to run through it, Jarrett?
I think we should do. I think we should run through it first, and then we can do questions. So as you hear your site or you have a question about a site, if you could do that, that would be best. I just worry that we'll get a little bit too jammed up if we're just talking about Indiana for 15 minutes and we won't give the other sites their day in the sun. So if we could, let's try to run through, and then we'll have ample time at the end to be able to address questions about different sites.
Perfect. So let's hit Iowa next. So Iowa was an expansion that we did earlier this year. We've been super happy with the Iowa site. And so we had a previous Iowa site a long time ago. That's why the current ones are 2 and 3 and 1 doesn't exist anymore. Looking at numbers recently, like when we look up the numbers today, we have high uptime utilization, like 99%. Historically, over last month, there was about a 95% uptime across the Iowa site with a 98% machine utilization. So in this particular facility, we've actually, it's a lot of our newer gen units. So S21s being deployed there. And then we had a recent expansion of over 3,000 miners that we sent there that were relocations out of Texas 3. So these were miners that have been running in the Texas 3 facility for a period of time. We had a large relocation out of Texas 3 into some other facilities we'll talk about when we get to that site. So some of those aging miners, when they go through relocation and all that, is when we have an opportunity to actually be really hands-on with these miners, go through them, make sure they're thoroughly clean. So whenever we do that, we send them to Denver, take care of that process, and then get them out to site. But it does affect a bit of the uptime and some of the utilization when these miners in transit. So you can only rack so many miners a day, get them connected to the network, get them online, and then maybe there's a fan that's bad that's got to be swapped out, and you go through that process. So as we put 3,000 miners plus into a facility, we generally see the uptime, waning a little bit, and the machine utilization kind of grows after that point. So excited to have those miners all racked and hashing again, and then, walking into the cooler months, it's going to be an awesome opportunity there. We'll jump into Manitoba. So up to our friends in Canada. So Manitoba facilities have historically been really good facilities over the years. As you guys see, we've built, went through 9 facilities there now, and 8 of them are online. So several thousand miners placed across multiple facilities up there. We're looking at about 96.9% uptime across all the facilities for the month of August and about a 92% machine utilization. One of the biggest issues with machine utilization in Canada is just repairs. There's not a lot of large volume repair vendors in Canada. And in order to get the miners through a repair process in the US, it requires importing, taxes, duties, all of that fun stuff that just makes it not really feasible. Like if you just had to swap a control board and get it back in, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to send the whole miner to a service center in the US and back. And so limited availability and repair is definitely something we've been working on. We actually partnered, and the Manitoba facilities have been able to hire and train up technicians to have repair in-house. And so that's been alleviating that more recently than it has in the past. So we should see higher machine utilization as we continue to get those miners back from repair. Minnesota, these have consistently been top performing sites. A lot of great people there working on site that we appreciate immensely. So last month we're looking at 97% uptime and about a 98% utilization. So one of the biggest things when we look at Minnesota is one, it's got a cooler climate, so summers aren't as bad, but in general, they still get hot days and they still also have utility curtailment. So a lot of the curtailment in Minnesota on that market is due to grid constraints. So it's essentially the grid operators that come down and say, hey, you're going to have to be shut off tomorrow from this time to this time. We have constraint coming, whether it's hot and people are kicking on air conditioners or there's maintenance going on somewhere else in the system. So it usually has lower levels of curtailment than some of the hotter states, but it's still there as it's part of a larger network. Ohio too. So this facility actually up until last month has had, really great uptime. We, generally see like 98, 99% uptime and 98, 99% machine utilization. In August, that was down. So we hit 94%. So we dropped below our 95% target and the machine utilization was pretty low. So it was a difficult month. A lot of the infrastructure there is mixed containers. So we have everything from RK containers to easy blockchain containers to BitRAM containers to eHouse containers. And across all manufacturers of containers, we wound up with a whole bunch of various electrical issues and then fan issues. So the large exhaust fans on the outside of containers, we had a handful of those die across a few containers, and then a few others we were dealing with larger breaker trips. So generally speaking, when we talk about breakers and trying to minimize downtime to that, we stock like 125 amp and below fairly regularly across all sites. So when those go, they're usually pretty quick to replace. The larger fuses and things like that's not an issue. Larger breakers or entire PDUs, those are the ones that, we still stock them, but maybe not in as high of volumes. And so if we have multiple failures, that can kind of catch up to us and end up taking a few day container offline for a few days. Or if we're having to remove exhaust fans and replace them entirely, the container has to go offline, which puts more miners down than we would want, but we got to get it sealed back up and the fan on to make sure they're running in a safe environment. So those, I think Tim might be able to speak to a little bit more to that once we get through this and the process that was undertaken there. But I believe we're all back up to where we should be. So everything should be exciting and moving forward in Ohio too. Ontario, so heading back up to Canada. Ontario is a site that has struggled historically in the summertime. This year, Ontario had done a decent amount of work with their hot aisle containment and adjusting. And the hot aisle, for you guys that don't mind, hot aisle containment is essentially just separating the hot aisle and cold aisle so there can't be any heat recirculation. The fans on the miners pull a significant volume of air. And so if it's not sealed off completely, they have the ability to just suck air around the miner and back into the hot side. So with that, we've actually seen better uptime than we did in previous summer months in Ontario. Not where we want it to be yet. So that's something that the site operators are going to continue working on over time. We have been doing some adjustments. So generally this is a 20 megawatt site and it has, thousands of miners in it. It's a big wall site. You guys can see the pictures online. But it had an aging batch of hardware as well. So we had a lot of older generations like M30s, older S19s and things like that. So those have been getting upgraded over time. And we've been putting in S21s. When that happens, because the S21 has a higher power consumption, 3,600 watts versus an S19 that's going to be 1,000 watts. 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 1,000 3,000 watts. We actually have to adjust our total amount of miners in the space because we can't exceed that 20 megawatts. Whenever you have a utility that gives you an allotment of power, if you exceed your allotment, you have huge penalties and fines, both from the transmission level, distribution level, local level, and so on. This happens in Canada as well. And the power in Ontario is actually pretty unique on how they share the demand charge across all large loads up there. So it's been a fun one to learn about and deal with over the last few years. But as we upgrade S21s, that means there'll be fewer miners in the facility, which is going to help improve any of those heating and airflow issues going forward. Texas 1, we'll just talk about Texas as a whole. So Texas 1, Texas 5, we obviously relocated out of Texas 3, which we can talk about the relocations. But Texas in the summer months is hot, man. June, July, August, this is the 4 CP months. So that's 4 coincidental peaks. We're looking for the highest load values in the month. Everybody's shutting off during that period of time. Generally, you see the pubcos like Riot and Marathon and everybody else, showing that, hey, we know it's going to be some hot days coming up. We know everybody's going to be kicking on their AC units, and the grid's going to be struggling here. Preemptively shutting down mining farms to alleviate that stress on the grid is one thing that all miners kind of participate in Texas. So in June, July, August, that is the lowest uptime for air-cooled facilities anywhere that we currently operate in. The rest of the year is usually pretty good. There might be a handful of curtailments and some really cold days in the wintertime, but it's not the same as the June, July, August months. So this is a place where there's a lot of renewable energy from wind, and we also have curtailments when the wind's not producing. So simply put, 80% of the grid there relies on wind energy in one form or another. And when that wind goes off, they have to kick up natural gas peakers. So we participate in the same programs as the natural gas peaker plants, in which instead of kicking up power and producing it to send to the grid, we just curtail, we shut off to allow that grid to go to residential. This helps stabilize the market, stabilize the prices, and protect the grid. Basically, if there's too much load, too much demand, it gets to a certain point, the utility just hits the trigger and starts cutting people off anyways, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's better to be preemptive, have a minor impact, and be able to get moving forward, be a good participant in that grid, so that Texas continues to love to have Bitcoin miners down there. As far as the relocation, so I don't remember the exact date we started relocating from the Texas 3 miners, but they've been relocated across our Indiana facilities, into our Iowa facilities. A handful went to some other facilities there, and then the last batch are being relocated to Nebraska. So a new Nebraska facility, it should be online before the 15th, so miners will be heading over there to get racked here shortly. There was a few delays in basically waiting on utilities. So anytime you have a new site going live, there's always delays, whether that's city inspector decided he wanted a different color light switch, or the utility had a different voltage regulator number that you needed, so you had to go get something manufactured and put in. There's always something that happens. So we've been working through that, dealing through that. Miners should be arriving there in the next week or so. They'll get all racked, and then when the utility gives the green light to energize, that site goes live. Pretty excited. It should start out about 10 megawatts, or sorry, 12 and a half megawatts. We have 15 megawatts there, so we can continue to expand that as well. And Nebraska, great environments. So part of the reason is you guys see these huge curtailments in Texas aren't the best for our clients, even though at the annualized 95% uptime, it all works out, but it's just never fun having these low uptimes in these summer months. Some people might have been grateful for it right now just because of the low hash price, but if there's a bull run coming, people don't want to be curtailed like that. So moving from hotter climates with high curtailment into cooler climates with lower curtailments is just going to provide a better opportunity for a lot of our clients that we currently host. And there's a lot of you right now. So I think that's all the facility updates. And I went through it super fast. So yeah, I think questions would be great right now.
Yeah, I agree, Shannon. That was an excellent overview, and you did that quite quickly. So we've carved out some time for some questions and some other chatter. I see a good amount of other fellow Compass employees on the call. So if they ever want to, come up on stage, clarify anything, support anything, answer, help, we have people from all over the Compass landscape on the call. So at this point, yeah, let's go ahead and, if you have a question, please request to come up on stage. Curtis is over on LinkedIn, and I wonder if he has any questions, Curtis, you're more than welcome to come up on stage and ask anything. Maybe for someone on LinkedIn, as they'll also be able to get the answer because you are streaming over there. And until someone comes up on stage, Shannon, would you mind kind of maybe, looking forward? We're about to come to the end of Q3 and get into Q4. The fall is happening. One of the things you've talked about is, the curtailments, bull run, just the entire landscape seems to be changing quickly. You've talked about how S21s are going to need more power, but then they're also going to take up less rack space, which should help with cooling and some of the heating. So anything you want to say there while we see if there's any questions?
Sure. Can you make me a co-host real quick and then bring up Sovereign if you can? I think you can just invite him onto stage. You can invite Curtis up too.
On it.
Cool. As far as like changing climate, obviously we're going into the colder months of the year. And we're seeing the S21s be delivered, S21 Pro delivered. S21 Pro was great because it's like almost an inch wider than the miners. So anybody with infrastructure that had horizontal racking now has to figure out how to adjust their shelves, thanks to Bitmain not telling us until they were like showing up in facilities. So that's always fun, but exciting, always exciting to see more and more efficient hardware and seeing that competition in the space. So we now have, we have Bitdeer producing miners again that look efficient. We have the Aerodyne miners, so new US-based manufacturer that's looking awesome and having a competitive miner. We have Canaan coming back in and getting down to the low, sub 20 watts per terahash range again. So seeing these manufacturers all becoming competitive and getting close. Bitmain still seems to be the winner at that watts per terahash standpoint, but it's exciting seeing everybody else catch back up and be able to release miners that are in that same group. So that's kind of fun. It is just a cycle that happens. Like we've been watching this happen over and over and over again. Since probably paying attention since S9 was my early generation. So we saw S7s leave into S9s and the very limited run of S15s. The what's miners from M20s to M30s and so on and so forth. And we see this switch as it comes over. We always kind of expect people to like shut off their old miners and plug in the new miners, but for the most part, that doesn't happen as much as we'd like. It's more of people just plug in new miners and keep the old miners running up to a certain point, and that's kind of always kind of fun to see. So the actual hardware lifespan of a miner can be up to like 5 years. Most of that's pushed out because of the increasing hash rate. So just more and more people coming online. I don't see that slowing down. Like we see the Pubco's announcements. We see, Cypher just bought a 300 megawatt site. We see the acquisitions from Riot. We see the acquisitions from Marathon. We see the acquisitions from CleanSpark. Everybody's just kind of growing from that standpoint. So I guess the only prediction I say is, well, you're going to see more hash coming online. It's nice and cool. If people are building in areas where the ground freezes, if they don't get digging here soon, they'll have frost, and then that won't come online until next year. So that's a good ramble.
That was a very good ramble, and I see that Curtis is up on stage and he looks to be off mic. Curtis, would you like to add in anything here? Curtis, we couldn't hear you, so I'm not sure if your mic is connected to a couple different things here. But yeah, Shannon, I think that was a really good ramble, but I think it was a good overview of, looking forward September, October, November, December, finishing out 2024 strong, getting into 2025, a time that I think everyone here on the call would love to see a nice, healthy bull run and some price appreciation and a, improved hash price for sure. Tim, I see you're now also up on stage. Shannon, I tried to invite Sovereign to speak, and I don't know if you want to try from now that you're co-host.
No, it's all good. He got the invite, so if he wants to come, he can chat. I just haven't talked to him in a long time, and we used to talk on Spaces all the time. So,
gotcha. I also see Brad James. Brad, I don't know if you want to hop up on stage and talk about mining until we get a facility focused question from a client or a partner. We've kind of got the time to talk about mining here a little bit. I will shamelessly promote the podcast that Tatum and I just did. I thought it was a good one. Tatum did a great job sharing his own story, getting into mining, as well as his thoughts on the evolution of hardware, which Shannon kind of actually just touched upon, as well as maybe some of the centralized threats or concerns to the overall mining industry. So that is, you can just find our X or check out YouTube or podcast platform and check that one out. Curtis, I see your mic is off again. Are you able to hop in?
I think his mic's open, and we're getting that feedback from him putting this on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder how he solves that. Curtis, you probably have to walk in another room and just leave the LinkedIn live on so people can still hear us, but separate yourself, because otherwise, yeah, there could be some weird feedback. Curtis, until that is solved, Colby, I see you up on stage. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and I'm staying extremely bullish. I think it's super interesting times, and my experience as an account manager at Compass is I see a lot of people going on the offensive, some people going on the defensive, and I think it's a really interesting time to kind of choose whether or not you're on the offense or the defense.
Can you break that down with an example of maybe some offensive things people should be thinking about and some defensive things people are doing, and kind of give us a good example of that from your position as someone who's supporting clients daily?
Certainly. I mean, I think speaking very generally, like the offensive thing to do is deploy more capital in the space and upgrade the equipment and get into the S21s, S21 Pros. The defensive thing to do, if you're going to go entirely on the defense, would be to sell your equipment. And I see a lot of coming.
Colby, your mic's going in and out.
Is it? How about now?
Now is much better, yeah.
So offensive is looking at the current market conditions as a huge opportunity, right? And that can be true for putting capital towards the top efficiency equipment, capital towards. Sorry, I think I fixed my mic.
Yeah, try, because otherwise it was going in and out again.
My apologies. So I think strategy wise, like if you're taking an offensive approach and you're looking at current market conditions as a huge opportunity, then obviously deploying capital into the most efficient equipment is one way to go about it, not necessarily the only way. Whereas defensive is exiting the market. And as someone that was buying S19s for over $7,000 myself, not something I personally want to do, and realize the loss of selling equipment at a huge discount.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And actually, another shameless plug coming here. We have a podcast coming out this next week with Nick and Noah, who are co-founders of the network firm, where we're going to be talking about tax implications of Bitcoin mining and just owning digital assets like Bitcoin. And you should check into that, because the thing that Colby just touched upon with the miner basically depreciation, or the price changing, is something we actually touch upon. And if you are on this call and own a miner, and maybe now it's not worth as much as it was when you bought it, you should check out that episode. I'm also going to see if Tim can come up on stage. I know that Tim is currently in transit. He's, I think, traveling between facilities. So I wanted to ask if Tim, I've sent you a couple of invites to speak. If you don't accept, I'll understand that you're driving and can't do this. But I wanted to ask Tim if he could come up and see if there was anything he wanted to add on to the facility, roundup and updates that Shannon gave us. So Tim, if you hear me, I know you hear me, maybe you can't accept the speaker. That's okay. Whenever you can, feel free to hop back up. Bradley James, how are you doing? How is life? What's going on?
I'm well, guys. Thanks for putting putting this on. This is interesting. Is this the first one you guys have done of this nature?
Yes, sir.
Is a great, yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's the first one in a little bit of time, and it's definitely something that we want to continue to do month on month to just kind of, we put out a weekly facility update, which is basically just many of the things Shannon said, but kind of in a blog format. You can check that out on the Compass Mining website. But we also wanted to kind of create a space where we can have a back and forth with clients and allow them to be able to ask questions about our facility updates and maybe get some more detail and some more context, because much of the stuff that Shannon shared today, I thought was really good to build context around curtailments, around, each facility has its own challenges incorporated with where it's located, right? The type of machines that are now operating there. So we're definitely hoping to create a monthly space, literal space and metaphorical space where clients can come in, ask us questions directly, and get real-time answers. But anyways, Brad, how's life post Nashville? I think that was the last time I saw you.
Yeah, I finally was able to take a month to kind of recover, which was good. So, guys,
I'm not hearing Brad.
Thank you guys for all your support. I can pop back.
We can hear you
too. Can you guys? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Colby's having some issues today.
Okay. No, great event. I think Nashville was really interesting, just from a general recap. And if you guys missed it, I'd go find some of the articles and feedback and things online. But overall, what I think is interesting right now is it's been a sideways crawl, and I think everybody kind of expected a big pump after Nashville, just from an economic standpoint. But to what Colby was saying, what you're saying, I think we're going to see a lot more people jump into the pool, probably in end of Q3 into Q4, at least based on conversations I've been having, leveraging that depreciative value of the equipment. So, right now, to Colby's point, the offensive strategy could be a very valuable thing, especially if equipment supply chain begins to get a little more scarce once everybody jumps in.
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel like we're in a valley. Obviously, the peaks and valleys of people's demand and then maybe the price appreciation of the hardware is obviously aligned with Bitcoin's price, right? As the price continues to go up, we should see more people have put their attention to Bitcoin mining to as a way to diversify their stacking of sats, right? So Colby looks to be back on stage, and I'm sure that, Colby does the hash highlights, the weekly hash highlights to support the media team here at Compass. And he's constantly talking about the fluctuations and how hash price is influenced, by difficulty, by the Bitcoin price. And actually this upcoming week, we will have an article done by Anthony Power and by Conrad that actually address those things, because those are things that are, the mining economics is something that's, it's on people's minds, right? When the hash price is where it is. And even though I think the overall sentiment of the space is let's continue to invest, let's continue to put capital into miners and get more hash online. So, but Brad, yes, you took some time off after Nashville. It sounds like you're, rejuvenated. Good to see you here. Colby, did you figure out your logistical stuff?
Yeah, apologies for the technical difficulties. Glad I could catch up to the conversation. I thought one point was interesting on the check-in that you did with Tyler about the different behavior in the different customer behavior, where some customers are going for the most efficient equipment and some are not, right? Some are still deploying capital into the likes of S19J Pros.
Yeah, do you want to speak a little bit more about that? Kind of give a recap of the conversation that Tyler and I had on the check-in?
Yeah, I would encourage people to check it out for themselves on YouTube, right? But just a divergence in behavior where miners are betting on overall market conditions improving, but in different ways. Some people think that the S19J Pro is going to outperform, putting a higher capex into the most efficient equipment.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Tatum, you're also here, and what Colby just said, I know that you probably have a lot of opinions about. I'm not sure if you're just listening, if you're able to hop up, but I will invite you to come up to speak, and we'll see if you're around. Eric is also here. Eric, it is after 11:30. I know Eric was really going to be able to only listen up until this time, and maybe Eric also wants to hop up and speak. Curtis, you're there. You're a speaker. Do you want to chime in? Really going to be able to only listen up until this time, and maybe Eric. Looks like Curtis is still having. Curtis, we're still. I still can't hear you if you're speaking. Shannon,
we'll just have to manage his Curtis's mute for him. I think when he's going back and forth between LinkedIn and here, it comes unmuted, and then we just hear ourselves coming back through it.
Gotcha. So, gotcha.
Tatum's probably sitting next to a rack of like 120 miners right now. So if he came off mute, it probably wouldn't be good.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, Curtis, you're back off mute. I am going to mute you, however.
Yeah, I do know that next to a rack.
We're getting some. We're getting some feedback.
Off mute, it probably wouldn't be good.
I agree. I've tried to mute Curtis. I don't know if it's working. Sorry. Shannon, facility updates. You talked about relocations. I think you touched on those after giving all of the kind of updates. But as that is something that does impact many people, would you mind going back over some of our relocation activity right now, as we now have, I don't know, 25 more people on the call that weren't on the call when you went over it about 15 minutes ago?
No, it's all good. The two most recent relocations, I guess there was a few. So there was a period of time, I believe was towards the end of last year, we relocated out of like Nevada and North Carolina. Last year, we also had relocations out of Florida and a few other places. But the most recent ones were out of our Texas 3 facility and then out of the Nebraska facility. And so one of the biggest focuses we have is moving from infrastructure that's not fully controlled and owned by Compass into more vertically integrated infrastructure. So the more that we can control it for our clients, the better. There's always a balancing act when you scale up within this space, whether that's joint ventures or co-location or whatever that may be, in order to get the scale to be able to drive down rates for clients so they're not paying 14+ cent for power at their house. We're one of the few people who still deal with retail. So people who can, minimum order one miner. So when we look at that aspect, we want to also take that person who that one miner is their entire world within this space, different than a client who may have 5,000 miners, and if one's dealing with an issue, it's not their whole fleet down, but someone where one miner is their whole fleet. And we want to be able to put them in a situation in which they're going to have the best experience. And the only way for us to do that is to control that experience from top to bottom, and then work to be able to give them more tools, options, and insights. I hope people have been seeing their updates on their dashboard, more stuff that's available for them to see, so that there becomes more value to the client from how they can interact with their miner over time. So you got to bear with us while we continue to build a lot of that stuff out within a few facilities. But that's one of the biggest things we're excited about is, there was a point in time when Compass did very little on-site operations. It was mostly remote operations. And we've moved into a space in which we heavily involved in on-site operations, operating our own sites. We get contracted to operate sites for third parties that have nothing to do with Compass or their miners. And then obviously that'll, continues down the chain into site development, sourcing, procurement, building, the whole 9 yards. So as you will continue to see relocations out of areas over time, when it becomes more advantageous for us to go full stack, from the dirt all the way up, and just be able to help clients that have a more better experience within the system. Brad, I'm not good at the hand raising thing. You just got to talk over me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I was waiting my turn. This is how I work. I'm like the student in the classroom who waits until you're done. So you're good, Shannon. I was just curious. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit. You've used the word relocation a lot today. And probably for some of your customers and clients, they're curious about what that process might look like. Could you walk through that maybe a little bit more in detail in terms of not only what it means technically, but what it means for them?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess the down and dirty of it is essentially we're going to go unplug your miner and go plug it into a new facility. So that's kind of the easy part of it. But the technical side of it is obviously, when you're dealing with sites of thousands of miners, identifying which ones are going to be moved at what point in time is always a complicated process that involves multiple members of our team. So whether we're looking at underlying power contracts or client contracts, we're looking at the efficiency of the hardware. We're looking at, hey, maybe XPs don't run as good in Texas, but they run better in Indiana and Minnesota. So we want to focus on getting them into places that they're going to have better uptime for the clients. There's a lot of variables that go into the relocation side decision-making process. After that, obviously, there's the on-site operations and logistics work. So planning out the timelines to be able to get extra hands on site to be able to go through, pull the miners, pack them so they don't get damaged in shipping. Take them to our service center, in which we are going to then essentially go through a cleaning process to remove any sort of dust that could potentially be in the miners, get them all nice and ready to go again, run them through a test bench with an aging test to make sure there's no components that are weak or ready to fail or have already failed, whether that's a fan or control board, power supply, maybe it's a temp sensor or a chip or something like that. Work with the clients to get the miners repaired if they need them, and then be able to get the logistics side set up to redeploy them at a new facility. So we always have to have the new facilities ramped up, built, scaled, ready to receive the miners, and that's always a juggling act, right? Because it's easy to tell one utility, hey, we're going to turn down at this point in time, and we're going to move the miners. The hard part is on the other side of that, the utility has to be ready to receive a very large load, right? It could be anywhere from a megawatt to 10 megawatts or larger, depending on how many miners we're moving at one time. So it's always on the receiving side that we run into third-party disruption. So we say third-party, right? You have utilities, you have landowners, you have cities, you have counties, you have inspectors. There's a lot of things that go into making sure the site can actually go live when you want it to. And it's a difficult process. I think if you guys have been in the space for a while and you've been watching it, you realize that I don't think I've ever seen any miner go live the exact day they wanted to. I think the closest I've seen was like within 48 hours of the target date. So when the miners land on site, they have to get redeployed, making sure all the miners show up within our system so we can monitor them, track them, make sure that the clients are aware of that. Obviously, during the relocation process, we pause their billing. If they're owed downtime credits, those things are put in their accounts, and then we resume billing after the miner's back online and gets running again. There's always a balancing act in there, but that's kind of the big picture. We generally communicate as close to the timelines we can with the clients so they have an idea of what their miner's process is going to be. This is the last relocation on Nebraska and Texas 3 have been the fastest relocations we've had in, I don't know, since Compass has been doing this. So we already have the majority of those miners back online. We're literally down to the last couple thousand miners that are heading to Nebraska and be online within a couple weeks. So that's pretty exciting. Like some of these processes in the past have taken months, 6 months, and we've dwindled that down to 3 months. Now we're looking at relocation timeframes that span weeks when we're dealing with thousands of miners, and that's just credit to the team. So like Tim and his team, Vishnu and his team, and Tatum and his team. Jared was here. There's a lot of people I could call out. Compass has like 140 employees now to be able to manage these roughly, near 60,000 ASICs across 21 independent facilities. So it's a pretty big undertaking as far as that goes.
So it sounds like to me, when you're doing this, it seems like a negative in the short term, but based on everything you just walked through, it's almost like a minor refresh and almost like a refurb, and then you're redeploying it in a better place so that their equipment can run at a higher performance to some extent, right? So I guess I brought that up, Shannon, just because I don't think a lot of people understand the value of taking a miner offline, even temporarily, just to do half of the stuff you laid out in that in that description.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big advantage is we're trying to get them to a better situation in general. So that's always the ultimate goal. It does give us an opportunity for clients who want to upgrade their miners. This is a good opportunity to do that. Or older generation miners that are struggling due to the down hash price. It gives them a little bit of a pause period in which they could have been in a rough situation, depending on the underlying rates and all that kind of stuff as well. So this was kind of good market timing for a transition like this, which kind of worked out.
Hey,
when that happens, can you,
Bradley, hold on a second.
ahead.
John Degnan, can you make sure you're muted and not moving A6 in a wind tunnel? Thank you.
Can you, Shannon, can you just walk through, maybe you brought up an interesting point that when this happens, so I'm sure there's a notification that goes out ahead of time. And then those discussions that are happening, maybe about potentially upgrading or doing some of those other things. What are the advantages of using times like that, those downtimes, to maybe take and do another analysis or like an annual review, right? So with clients that we work with, we really work hard to try and book an annual review. And this sounds like a great time that if you're a client, when that's happening, to try and get something on the calendar for you guys to have maybe those discussions that dive into how the operation's going and everything else. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and actually it's something that we've been focused on is scaling up our account manager team for conversations like that. So Eric, I believe, runs our account management team. And then I think, John and Colby are involved on that side as well. And so they can kind of speak to the conversations they have with clients and how detailed it goes into. The biggest thing is we have far more clients than we have account managers. So it sometimes becomes difficult to get to all of them. And so there will be bulk messaging and things like that as it goes. But if one of those guys want to speak to it, I apologize. I actually have to jump. But thank you guys for listening and coming out. I'm sure everybody else will do a wonderful job.
See you, Shannon. Talk later.
Thank you, Shannon. John Degnan, you, and I apologize for saying you were throwing ASICs in a wind tunnel. Maybe that was actually Shannon's background. I know he's also in transit, as is Tim. And actually, I want to provide also some context. I was speaking with Tatum here on the side. Tatum is doing the wonderful service of recording this beyond just the internal X recording, because that isn't really easy always to export. So Tatum is not going to hop up on mic because he is doing us a big favor by getting this recorded, and we will be able to then share that later with people who missed it. So John Degnan, you are up on stage. The mute is off. How are you doing? John, can you?
I had to.
I know. I've got some sound effects I want to play around with too. John, can you hear me? Or it seems like Compass people are having some struggles today with the tech. John's back on mute. John, can you hear us? John, if you're trying to use an external mic, don't do it. Just have your phone and try it that way. Colby, I see you're up. Do you wanna hop in now? Have you figured out your mic situation?
I think so. Brad, great point about reviewing the strategy and taking the opportunity to go back to the drawing board and review the strategy moving forward, especially if a miner's offline for a repair or a relocation, then even more so. But I feel like in this space that's constantly moving, market dynamics constantly changing, the best time to review your strategy is like always, right? So taking those opportunities and having the discussion about how you want to move forward and streamline your operations is a really important discussion to have, and we're more than happy to have it. Like Jarrett mentioned, we're building out, and Shannon mentioned this as well, we're building out the account management team, and that's what we're here for, is to provide that information.
That's awesome. I mean, I think, one of the challenges when you're co-locating equipment or you're running a business or an operation that's mining is often clients, because they're not in the mine every single day. It's one of those things where it's out of sight, out of mind. No pun intended. And I think just making sure that planning those touch points with whomever's helping to manage that operation from your vendor side is really important. So if you guys, the clients who are listening or those people checking in, take those opportunities because they don't always come around because there aren't enough people like Colby and the account management team at Compass. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. And you guys, it's good to see you guys are adding a lot more to that team because that's the professionalization of this entire industry that helps. It just makes it easier, more transparent, easier to understand all of the above. So awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Colby,
thank you, Brad, for saying. Oh, Brad, sorry, do you want to say something else?
yeah, I was just going to ask a question. You know, what would be interesting to hear because I'm sure you're having some of those conversations. What are some of the top questions you're getting in those conversations from your clients, Colby?
Yeah, to your point, people are not in the mine and, doing the hard reboots and replacing fans themselves. So it may not be at the very front of their mind. And that's true for retail customers. It's also true for a lot of enterprise customers because they've got other businesses going on. And when they have a hosted machine, they don't necessarily want to be thinking about it, all the time, right? It's somewhat passive. One thing that I have found is that particularly with the, new all-time lows that we've seen in hash price, people are starting to take the conversation more seriously and say, hey, now I need to put my attention on this because market conditions have changed. So I think that in the spirit of, knowing our customers' needs and supporting customers, the more often that we can check in and see what they'd like to achieve and how they would like to achieve it from an efficiency standpoint and otherwise, that's really important. And I think just not having that conversation is not ideal. So therefore, the more communication, the better. And just to circle back, things that come up are, hey, now that market conditions have changed, what are some tools and some options so that I can put myself into a better position one way or another? And so, I don't know if anybody wants to jump in here. I'll pause.
That's good. I mean, are there levers then that I mean, if they're asking those questions, how are those discussions going? Because usually it's not a single silver bullet to get people there unless you're just updating things. It's usually a combination, and there's a little bit of a plan, right? You're almost functioning as an advisor to some extent on their investment into the tech. So are there strategies that you're laying out that are helpful for people to take a look at and maybe come prepared with?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's no one silver bullet that's going to be right for everybody. There are different tools available to different customers of all sizes. And that includes, increasing efficiency, which could look like you're going to lean in and you view it as an opportune time in the market cycle to lean in and really double down or triple down one's position and invest heavily into equipment, whether that's new or used, the top efficiency equipment or not the top efficiency equipment. But we're also seeing people that want to slim down their fleets. And because some machines are underwater, they want to go ahead and reduce the liability side of their hosting fees into more efficient equipment that they can continue to operate long term into the future. So there's a wide range of different ways to achieve that. Whether someone is looking to slim down and be more lean and mean, or expand. And we do have options to trade current equipment, in some cases providing above market value and credits towards an upgrade to the top efficiency equipment, such as the S21 or the S21 Pro.
Do you guys offer any other like levers or anything else? Maybe firmware adjustments, overclocking, underclocking, any of those other things that are machine based, or is it adjusting? Is it just fleet management from a hardware standpoint?
Yeah, at this time, it is just managing the efficiency of your hardware, and we're not able to provide the auto tuning or overclocking or underclocking at scale. It's just not something that we're able to provide at scale, although it is in discussions, and that is a question that comes up, but it's not available at the moment. If and when it does become available, we will, of course, be happy to communicate that, but not yet.
That's good.
Colby.
Sorry.
Brad, if I could, thank you for asking these questions. These are great questions, and mining with Brad and the work you're doing there's nothing more on the ground than that. So these are great detailed questions, and I think actually John Degnan may want to hop in here and also add some context. John, you there? John, if you're speaking, unfortunately, we can't hear you. I don't know what's going on. All right. Yeah. Okay. Brad, do you want to? I'm sorry. I kind of cut you off. I feel bad, but I wanted to make sure John got his 15 minutes of fame there. But Brad, continue, and then I'd say if you got another question or something for Colby, we will probably come to an end pretty soon. We're about 4 minutes to the top of the hour.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'm more or less asking some of these questions so everybody understands. When you're managing equipment like this, and you're managing, if it's one miner or a fleet, to understand how your equipment works, I think is really important, and to understand the constraints when you're managing specific types of equipment. So to your point, Colby, I know a lot of when we're dealing with retail, and I'm sure you guys, it's just makes more sense to simplify, which means adjusting and updating equipment. And as you're looking at some of these other things, and maybe some of your other sites, are your sites ever doing anything that have to deal with managing uptime, downtime, dealing with firmware updates or overclocking, underclocking, or is it you guys are running at spec most of the time?
So we are updating the firmware in terms of manufacturer firmware. It's just not something we're running aftermarket firmware on. So from an efficiency standpoint, just taking care of the cooling and making sure that we have a good solid connection and good airflow and heat management and whatnot at the actual facilities, so that we have an optimal environment for the miners.
That's awesome. That's so important, and that's why I was really intrigued by you guys updating and moving equipment around to get to better performance overall. Because I know not many hosting providers would even think or have the capabilities of doing that. So it's really a big advantage for you guys and for your clients to really understand the why that's happening, because that is something usually you sign up for a hosting contract and you're locked in for 2 to 3 years, and you guys are actively looking at the equipment going, hey, this type of equipment performs better at this site, so why don't we just take the time to move it? And in the meantime, we're going to give that equipment a refresh so that it's up to date and making sure it's running correctly. I think that's just such an advantage that you guys offer, and I'm sure most people don't realize how advantageous that is for their operation. So well done.
Yeah, Brad, thank you for saying that, and it's great. Everything you've just said is the reason why we want to create these spaces for people from Compass, whether that's Colby, whether it's our partners, which Compass sees you as a partner 100%, to kind of come on and add that extra context, add that extra detail to create the full story. I think sometimes things get lost, and like you said, if it's out of sight, out of mind, and then it's down, it can be a little complicated. But I do want to say we're about a minute to the top of the hour, so I am going to wrap up. Rich Israel, I saw that you had asked how to get in touch with a representative from Compass, because the person you were working with before is now no longer here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a DM as soon as this is over, and just respond with your email, and we will go ahead, and one of our customer service agents is going to hop in immediately and hopefully get you the support that you need, hopefully within the next hour. I know that a couple of people on the call can help out. So thank you everyone for for taking the time to hop on this call. We will organize something for the end of September, likely the last Friday of the month. I think that's the cadence we would like to get into to find some consistency and allow customers to know that, hey, 11 a.m. last Friday of the month, let me hop on X and ask a question that I have about XYZ facility. So we'll see you in the next, I guess it will be the September facility roundup. So be on the lookout for that, but it will be the last Friday in September at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will see. Colby, you have one last thing to say. One last thing. This is like the lights are on at the club. You got to dance.
You don't got to go home, but you got to go somewhere, right? Somewhere else. So just wanted to give a shout out that if anybody's interested in getting some more information about the options that are available to start mining or mine more efficiently, of course, we've got that Pro Pack where we're deploying 10 S21 Pros estimated to come online by the end of September, so within about 30 days. And that is a killer deal at 5,000 a pop per S21 Pro. And at scale, that's 2.34 petahash. So it's a lot of the most efficient hash coming online. Reach out to any of us. John's on the call. Jarrett, I appreciate you hosting this. And any one of us are more than happy to help out. So thanks for joining us today, folks. Happy hashing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, happy hashing. Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll see you last Friday in September. And I'd just be on the lookout. We have some other live X Spaces coming up in September, but we will see you on the last Friday of the month in September. I'm not looking at my calendar for fear of somehow closing this out before it's over at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a good weekend.